Hey guys, in this video I have a special guest, Ken. He's an immigration attorney in the US. Stick around. Okay, everybody, so we have Ken, who's living in Tennessee, and Ken is actually an immigration attorney, and he's also married to a Filipina from outside of Davao in Mindanao. So, Ken, I appreciate you coming on my channel. Thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome, but I do have to tell everybody this disclaimer that although I am an attorney, I do practice immigration law in the United States. Nothing that I say should be construed to create an attorney-client relationship or be considered to be legal advice. This is just general legal information.
Perfect. Thank you, Ken. So you yourself, when did you first discover the Philippines, and how did you decide, hey, I'm going to marry a Filipina? How did that come about?
Actually, that was about 6 years ago when the last marriage I had failed. And it became so frustrating because I began to realize not only do I have my doctorate in law, but also I have my graduate studies were in counseling. And I began to realize that my ability to pick women was off. But more than that, I've been finding how few really good quality women there were available. And that would match my values and my interests and not be narcissistic. It seems like narcissistic personality disorder is so widespread. And so I began to think, oh, wait a minute, the people that I knew when I was a teenager used to have really good qualities, but all the good ones got married and are happily married. So I like to joke about it in a way that that says, you know, I couldn't find a good woman in the United States to marry, so I decided to raise my own and go to find one in the Philippines. Now I joke about that, but I started looking on the websites, and then I started contacting some, and I went through so many that were scammers. Now, I've been a lawyer for 31 years, but I have 15 years of law enforcement too, along with my training in counseling. I was able to pick out the scammers pretty easily. Yeah. And but I went through so many of them that I consider it like this. You know, you go to the sandy beach, and you have to go through thousands of grains of sand to find one perfect gem. And that's what I had to do. I found, I sorted through all of the scammers, and I found my wife, Jally.
Fantastic. And what was the Philippines the first country that came to mind, or did you have some other countries that you were considering when you were looking?
Well, I've always been attracted to the Asian appeal. I also wanted to, find somebody that didn't have a lot of baggage, and I didn't know very much about Filipinas at the time. So I had the thought that, well, here anybody that's over 30 is going to have a lot of baggage or be very independent and self-centered. And so I was kind of expecting that. So I started looking for people that were between 25 and 35 to sort through. And the age gap being what it is, most of the countries were not really conducive to that, but the Philippines seemed to be wide open as far as their views on age gap relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I know well, how many trips did you end up going out to the Philippines?
I went just once.
Just
I went there
one time?
Yeah, 12 days, yes.
And you had already arranged where you guys were going to meet, or did you meet more than one girl, or?
No, I only met one. The way I looked at it, it was just fine to communicate with several, but once I was starting to found the person that I wanted to meet. I was not about to consider anybody else. So I stopped communicating with all the others, and I made the trip. And she actually flew up from Davao to Manila and met me at the airport there.
Wow.
And then we
Okay.
went back down to flew back down to Davao, but she was actually living in Tagum City, which is right outside.
That's right. And so you guys met, fireworks happened, and then how much longer before you guys actually got married?
Well, the fireworks did happen. My concern was whether or not she would be the same person in person and
Right.
spending time together, because I was still always alert for scammers. She turned out to be just the absolute person. I met her whole family. They had this big get together, and then I asked her to marry her there. And we ended up then having an engagement dinner where she invited 20 of her closest friends. I found out that so many of them are so social that they have dozens of friendships, close friendships. And so I was worried, because there were going to be 22 people in this fancy restaurant. And I was worried about the cost, and it ended up, for the whole thing, cost me $75. So that was quite a pleasant surprise. So I came back here to continue my law practice, and I immediately petitioned the I-129F. And the problem is that she went up to Manila, to St. Luke's, to get her medical exam, and it turned out that she was diagnosed with tuberculosis.
Wow.
And I had no symptoms. And so that was going to take quite a bit of time to be treated. She had to be treated and diagnosed with, that she was free of the disease. So what takes place is, if you go back to the process, takes about a year and a half. However, if you stay there and in Manila and go to St. Luke's every day for her injections and tests, then it's 6 months. So we did that. I had her go up to Manila, and she stayed in. You can stay in either, there are condos and there are decent rooming boarding houses right close to St. Luke's Hospital. And so she stayed in a nice boarding house and had fun for 6 months, while I helped her.
Wow.
And then once she got free, then she got the visa. The visa was delivered to her, and she flew over here. I'm in Tennessee. She landed in Atlanta, and we were married about a week later.
So she came on the fiancé visa. That was your preferred method out of the two options there, either getting married in the Philippines or doing the fiancé visa?
Yes. There's several reasons for that. Now, it over the years, even decades, it keeps going back and forth between which is faster, the I-130 petition for relative or the I-129F fiancé visa. And the I-129 visa at the time was having just about the same amount of time as the I-130, but the I-129F is actually a less costly and a faster, easier process. And so we wanted to get married here. And now I have a nephew that got married over there, but what he did, he still used the I-129F. But what they did is they got a marriage, but made sure that the minister did not register the civil ceremony. So they had a religious ceremony there, left out the civil ceremony, came here on the fiancé visa, and got married. I think the scrutiny is less on a fiancé visa than it is on the I-130.
Okay. Now, are there some benefits? My understanding is that, let's say she comes over on the fiancé visa, then in order for her to work, she's going to have to apply for the green card, and that takes quite a bit of time too, right?
Yes, but there is another form called the I-765, which is the employment authorization document. And so you can apply for that at the same time, and the employment authorization document doesn't take as long.
Okay. Now, if you did get married in the Philippines and then you petition or you fill out the forms and everything for her to come to the U.S. that way, is she able to does she get a green card right away going that method? Like she's able to?
Well, did you ask about the I-130 or the I-129? The relative or the fiancé?
The relative, yeah.
Okay, the petition for relative, when you file the petition for relative, if the fiancé is outside the United States, we're in the Philippines, it's most likely going to be, then you have to file the I-130, wait till that gets approved, then you can go ahead and file the she can come here, she can get a visa to come here, and you can file then the application for the green card.
Okay, and so
it does take a lot of time, but she would be here. But it seems to be simpler, less scrutiny, and the whole process overall seems to go faster with the fiancé visa.
Okay, so there's a couple things that I've heard, and I am no expert by any means. I've gotten some of my knowledge just from watching the show 90 Day Fiancé out of entertainment. And but a couple things that I heard is that when they come over on a fiancé visa, once you get married, you are responsible for them financially for a certain amount of years. Is there any truth to that? And if so, what exactly are you responsible for?
Well, regardless of how they come, it's the same. You have to do an 864 affidavit, an I-864 affidavit of support. And part of that, that affidavit of support, there's an I-864 and an I-864A, which is a contract. And so once she comes over here, whether it's as your spouse or as a fiance, the U.S. citizen is responsible for her to be supported at 125% of the United States poverty guidelines. Okay. And so we're looking at, I don't have it in front of me and I don't keep it memorized. So it's like, somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 a year, depending upon whether you have any other dependents. But you have to be able to meet this. They can Google 125% of poverty guidelines and it'll pop it up on the USCIS website. And so for a period of generally they say 10 years, but it has to be, you are responsible to make certain that she is supported or does not go on the public dole. What you have to do is ensure that she is always going to live at the 125% for a total of what's called 40 quarters. That comes out to 10 years. But the 40 quarters you can earn credit toward that. When she starts working, she can be earning those credits to that. So it could be as short as 5 or 6 years. But you are responsible. Now, if something should happen, like you get a divorce, okay? Now, in the first 2 years of having a green card, it's called a conditional green card. And during those 2 years, if you get a divorce on grounds other than something like domestic violence or extreme control or some of those things, then if it's other than those reasons, then she would lose her green card and she would have to go back to the Philippines. On the other hand, once you get to the 2-year point, you can apply to have the conditions removed, and at that point, when that happens, you get your 10-year green card. I'm sorry, I just had a senior moment there for a second.
You're sharp. No worries.
Well, I'm 70, but they say I don't look a day over 95. And every once in a while, I lose words that I commonly use, and I just suddenly can't reach for them. But anyway, when they get the 10-year green card, then if they get divorced, you are still responsible for them. I had one situation where the client was traveling for business, and he regularly went to this certain country, not the Philippines, but he regularly went to one of these countries, and every time he was there, he decided to use the services of prostitutes. And there was one prostitute in particular that he had a liking for, and after time, they developed a relationship. And he decided to marry her. So he did. He married her and petitioned for relative, brought her here. And she got her green card here. And in 2 years, she suddenly, after 2 years of getting her 10-year green card, she filed for divorce and decided she wanted to live a singles life in the United States. And he had to support her. And the problem is, the federal courts have deemed that a petitioner, the foreign spouse, or the state courts can enforce that affidavit of support and that contract at 125% as alimony in the courts. And so there's been a lot of litigation over that through the states. But if she divorces him when she gets her 10-year green card, then he is still responsible until the obligation ceases. And so that is another reason why it's so very important to figure out if the person is a scammer or not, because that's one of the most that's a dangerous situation, and it happens all the time. I get calls about it all the time about women who, once they get that 10-year green card, suddenly the marriage breaks up.
What about a prenup? Does that protect you from any of those obligations at all, or no?
Well, it does protect you from some obligations. Now, under most state laws, the assets, once you are married, any assets that accumulate during the marriage or increase in value during the marriage become marital property and are subject to being divided. Now, a prenup can be effective in stopping it. Now, in the United States, a prenup is really valid and can be enforced if under some conditions. If it is, if there's been full disclosure of the assets, and if the other person has been equal in bargaining. In other words, the spouse has to also see an attorney to consider this prenuptial agreement and get legal advice. Then it can be enforceable. Now, on the other hand, and I just had this other case with a prostitute just recently. And so I had to do some legal research on that. And one of the things that I discovered, if the prenup meets the requirements of the law of that country, it is entitled to full faith and credit in the United States. So whether or not a local court would honor it, there are really no cases that I've been able to find anywhere in the country that have addressed the issue of whether or not it is absolutely enforceable. It's enforceable on one hand, but on the other hand, in family law, there's enough discretion on the part of judges that adjustments can be made. But so the answer to the question then is the prenup can protect the citizen from his assets that he has accumulated, the increase in those assets that would other be marital property, and get a fair, and any assets that he had that were maintained or assisted in paying off with marital funds, it will be protected. But it does not apply to the affidavit of support and the contract and alimony.
Gotcha. Now, another question, and I don't know if you know it or not. You probably do, but my understanding is that if you get married and you're in the U.S., the Filipina needs to live and be a citizen of the U.S. at least 5 years before she could collect on Social Security, like if you were to pass away, or is that, do you know anything about that?
No, actually, I don't. In the United States, there is a certain benefit. In the United States, there is you have the ability to collect on, so a spouse has the ability to collect on on the Social Security once they've been married at least 10 years. So a 10-year marriage qualifies the spouse to either collect under her own Social Security record or her spouse's Social Security record. So she can choose. So yeah, she can benefit, but that's after a 10-year marriage, I believe.
10 years.
Now, I don't practice Social Security law, so it's just something that just I pick up over the last 150 years of practice. Now,
you plan on staying in Tennessee, or will you and your wife move to the Philippines at some point, do you think, or are you guys happy where you're at?
Well, that's an interesting question. My wife is much younger, so she is, what we're doing is, her goal is to enable me to retire. So she just got accepted into a nursing program, so she starts nursing school here in a few weeks. Wow. And once she gets her RN, she wants me to cut back or retire, whatever I want to do. Maybe I'll start a YouTube channel and compete with Gio in the Philippines. But we have talked about the possibility of eventually my retiring in the Philippines. Of course, my concern is medical. That's my greatest concern. So that has to be explored. But I do have a really good friend who we just kind of helped matchmake him with one of Jally's friends from the Philippines. And they are building quite the relationship, and he's all said he's planning on coming there. He's already got it decided. He started liquidating assets. In fact, he made an arrangement with his son to buy his house from him. And within the next year or two, he's wanting to move to the Philippines, but he wants to either go to something a little bit cooler like Valencia or Baguio, where there's a little altitude to lessen the heat a little bit. So he is basically the best friend I have in the United States, and that has gotten Jally and I, talking about it. So we really are open to moving over there. Yes.
Fantastic.
We'll move in next door to you, Gio, and then we'll have a barking dog that barks all the time, and several roosters that are crowing throughout the day.
I already have neighbors like that, so I don't know if I would notice.
Well, then I'd have to buy an old-fashioned jukebox and crank up the volume.
Roosters and karaoke, they're prevalent in the Philippines, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome. I've learned a lot myself, and I really appreciate it. Maybe we can talk again, because my guess is I'm probably going to get a lot of comments and questions down below. I know you can't give legal advice, but maybe we could talk generally about some of the topics that pop up. So,
and I'd love to do it.
Oh, fantastic. So I really appreciate your time today, Ken. Nice meeting you and your wife, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Okay, that'll be great. Can I leave one final word?
Please do. Yeah.
Okay. I'm a lawyer with a police background. Be absolutely certain that you do not let your emotions dictate what your decisions are. In counseling, we talk about the right brain, which is the seat of emotions, the left brain, the seat of logic. And you got to be careful because your right brain will lie to your left brain all the time. So you've got to be really careful. Don't consider all the Filipinas to be negative. Actually, I find that Filipinas by far are the best women of all the women that I meet here. And so I want to encourage you all, but you also have to use your brain. Learn everything you can about picking out the scammers and picking out the selfish women, because one of the things that does happen, there are Filipinas who do show every sign of being wonderful, will marry you, come here to the United States for at least 2 years, and then divorce and go. But there are ways. And I've noticed that a lot of the vloggers have done a wonderful job of helping to identify when you have a really good woman. And I think the good women are in the majority. The bad women just tend to be in the majority online. But the great women, the best women in the world, are there in the Philippines and are in the vast majority. So thank you, Gio, and I would be honored to come back again.
Appreciate it, Ken. Very well stated. We'll leave it at that and see you next time.
Okay, take care.
Take care.